It is the final legal talk for 2023. It's unbelievable. And today we're chatting to Associate Attorney who's fairly new at the firm, Reynier Rautenbach, joining us to talk about liquidation. That's our final topic for this year. Reynier, welcome to Legal Talk and pleased to meet you.
Thank you for inviting me to the show. It's actually an honor to be on here, and hopefully we engage more in future as well.
I'm sure we will. Reynier, today we're talking about liquidation. I'm sure our listeners know what liquidation is, but would you mind just briefly explaining it for us? What is liquidation?
Okay. Basically, I want to explain for those who are not fully aware of it, but in layman's terms, like plain, simple language. I don't want to throw any jargon around or anything like that.
Perfect.
So, basically, liquidation is a legal process which, in a nutshell, and simply means the closing of a business's doors, and then the assets are divided amongst the creditors and the shareholders of that particular business. So in South Africa, we actually have two forms of liquidations, the one being voluntary and the other being involuntary. Now, with voluntary liquidation, it is either initiated by the directors or the shareholders of that business. Now, in respect of involuntary liquidation, on the other hand, it's initiated either by the creditors of the business or by the courts.
And can you explain a little more regarding voluntary and involuntary liquidation? What's the difference between the two?
Okay, certainly. Okay, in terms of the voluntary liquidation, and as I've already mentioned, the directors or the shareholders of the business initiate the process. And this is actually when they are of the belief that the business is unable to pay its debts as the debts become due from the creditors. Now, the process begins with the shareholders or the directors passing a resolution. A resolution is then submitted to CIPC. For those who don't know what CIP stands for, it is the Companies of Intellectual Property Commission.
Yeah.
Okay. After now submitting to the CIPC, the business is then placed under control of a liquidator. Yes. And now in terms of involuntary liquidation, either the creditors or the court initiates the process. And this is also when they're of the belief that the business is unable to pay its debts as the debts become due from the creditors. Now, this one starts off with a Section 345 notice, and that's in terms of Insolvency Act. Now, in this scenario, application is made to the court for the liquidation of the business. And if the court grants the liquidation, then the business will be placed under liquidation and into the hands of the liquidator.
It's very sad. I mean, knowing that that business is it was somebody's dream, and now it's being liquidated. It's always very, very sad to see that in the news. But we get it; creditors need to be paid. But you also always think about, the job losses and everything that's going with it. It's a very, very sad process, actually. Can you, lastly, Reynier, briefly explain the steps involved in the liquidation process?
Okay, and in brief and consideration of the amount of time, I don't want to get too much into depth and bore your listeners. Okay. So I'm just going to keep it in a nutshell.
You'll only bore me, don't worry, okay. Okay, carry on.
Okay, in South Africa, the liquidation process, it's four, you can say it's 4 steps. It's but it's actually more elaborate than that. Anyways. So we start off with number 1. Okay, the liquidator, which is usually an attorney or an accountant or a business rescue practitioner, gets appointed. But this is now after the business has been placed into liquidation. Then you get to point number 2. The liquidator then conducts an investigation into the business's affairs, and amongst other things, he looks at the assets and the liabilities of the business. Then after he's done his investigation, then he determines whether there's assets or not. And if there's assets in the business, then they'll be sold off to pay debts of the business, including paying employees. Or in this current day and age, it's not always fun. It's a sad, as you said, it's a sad thing.
Yeah.
So, then we get to point number 4. After the sale of the assets. The proceeds are then distributed to creditors in a ranking order, which is determined. And then whatever's left over, the remaining proceeds, then gets distributed to the shareholders. So at the end.
And that's liquidation in a nutshell. And hopefully this never happens to our listeners.
Yeah, that's very much in a nutshell. It's, just to point it out there that, look, in this day and age, it's happening often. It's happening a lot. Companies, especially from COVID time, it's occurring more and more often.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
And also people mustn't overcommit or should I say, go more into debt or anything like that for the company's purposes.
Reynier, thank you so much. Nice to talk to you, and hopefully we'll chat again next year. Wishing you a wonderful festive season with your friends and family as well.
Same, likewise to you and your listeners. And yes, hopefully I'll be on this radio again next year.
Cool. Thank you so much, Reynier. Have a wonderful festive season, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you so much.
Are you or your business in trouble and struggling to find a solution? Call Hahn & Hahn Attorneys as we assist clients in finding solutions. We specialize in consumer and food law, commercial and construction law, forensic investigations and administrative law. Visit hahnlaw.co.za. That's HAHN. We assist clients nationwide. Hahn & Hahn Attorneys, because we care. Don't miss Legal Talk with Hahn & Hahn Attorneys, Wednesday mornings at 10 on eRadio.